for the public that may be watching or may be here to have some of the same information, so they'll have an idea of the things that we're dealing with. And let me just speak to myself that I have to deal with and consider when I consider this issue. So some of this might just be to you, General Counsel, if you may. Is there a legal definition of political speech that you may share? Did I say that right? Political speech?
Is there, no, well, yes and no. The Janice case makes it clear that gender orientation is political speech. There's a case out of the Federal District of New Jersey, which is the JC case, which was a case involving students, makes it clear that Black Lives Matter is political speech. There's an opinion written by the Inspector General that says it's issue-based political speech, but it's not political activity. Political speech for us appears to be, from our policy, political activity such as campaigning, supporting, or showing support of. That's how I read the policy. So I guess I feel like the question's broad. So my answer is yes and no, a typical lawyer answer. Yes, here's where the courts have come down on these things. Can it be changed? Sure. The Hatch Act defines political activity as partisan politics, and the Reno City defines political activity as partisan politics. It's my understanding. I haven't looked at their ordinance or their employee issue, so I don't know the answer to that. So maybe I shouldn't opine upon what the city of Reno does. But those are the federal cases that I'm aware of.
So based upon, if I may follow up, Madam President, because I have several questions. So based upon that and what's happened federally, that's where in our district then your office has, because it's your job in your office to give us the legal opinion of it, that Black Lives Matter is considered political speech, because there's a case around that. And then also there a political action. Would you share on? I think that just came up, right?
Yeah, it did just come up. In October of this year, the Black Lives Matter did file the appropriate paperwork with the Elections Committee to become a political action committee. That was October of 2020. October 7th, 2020, they filed the paperwork to become a super PAC, which stands for Political Action Committee, which I think probably further paints it into the realm of political activity, in my opinion. And I think the law would support that, especially when the cases that existed were before the 2020 filing, and yet they already opined that those were, that it was a political action or political activity.
Okay, and then just is there, I guess similarly, I would say is there something that would consider like the rainbow flag or some show of support around LGBTQ plus issues? Is there anything, because that isn't really an organization, right?
Right.
Like Black Lives Matter is, so how?
Yeah. So the Janice case, the Supreme Court opined in that case that discussions and actions in support of sexual orientation, and it referenced the rainbow flag, were still political activity. So albeit not an organization, I do see the point that it's slightly different, but, and I should mention also that you mentioned it was federal courts. The First Amendment would only go to federal court. State courts arguably have the right to opine upon it, but their opinions wouldn't mean as much as the federal court. But back to the Janice case, I feel that the U.S. Supreme Court in our office, we've all read it. We have 3 attorneys. We are all, I mean, I'm not going to be as broad as to say I'm an expert in the First Amendment, but I do teach classes on the First Amendment, so I have a pretty good grasp of it. I think the court has said that it is political activity. Similar, the Confederate flag does not have a group, and yet it is considered political activity. So that would be a similar circumstance. I've opined in personal writings and in teachings that it's probably hate speech, but there's no court case that actually says that, ironically enough. I think it is, but anyway, I digress. The point is I still think Janice applies, and the flag would be political activity.
The rainbow flag is specifically mentioned in Janice?
Because, yeah, it's reference. It's reference. I don't want to, but it's used in parades and in front of the Supreme Court. In fact, anytime you see an event in front of the Supreme Court that has to do with sexual orientation, LGBTQ plus issues, the flag is the symbol that's used. And so that's where that comes from.
So based upon that, what can happen in the classroom then? We know students' rights are very different, right?
Yeah.
But if you're a teacher in the classroom, right? I mean, what can occur? What is based upon what's outside of the court decisions?
Sure.
Right. What can occur?
That's a great question, and one I was hoping would be asked of me. I think we can teach about all of this. I think it's curriculum. It's a historical moment, and to ignore it is a mistake. The point of the policy is it's an HR issue. It's what teachers can and can't do. We may all sit here and support BLM or rainbow flags, but we all don't support pro-life or pro-choice. And if you allow one, you have to allow them all. And that's the issue. But what you can do is you can teach about it. And students can wear Black Lives Matter, and they can wear Blue Lives Matter. I personally oppose the Confederate flag, so I would be opposed to students wearing that. And I can make a different argument because it's hate speech. But the point being is students can do that and teachers can teach about it built into the curriculum. And it's my understanding the superintendent is working on a curriculum. The law requires us to have a curriculum. The law doesn't allow us to just go off and teach on topics we want to teach on because we feel like it. It's not a university. We have to meet certain standards by the NDE. But yeah, it's a curriculum. Teach about it. Go for it. As soon as we get the curriculum done, let's do it.
Or if a teacher can tie them to, if they're talking about history or they're talking about current events, they don't have to have this is the official school. You know what I mean? If it comes up in the something that
absolutely
a teacher would be permitted if they're talking about current events right now, for an example.
I think so. If you're a contemporary issues teacher, gosh, it was quite a while ago, but when I was in high school, we had contemporary issues, my favorite class ever. And we read the Newsweek, and whatever the Newsweek said, that's what we studied for the week. And if the Newsweek talked about Black Lives Matter, do they even have Newsweek anymore? That's probably all online. But anyway, if it talked about Black Lives Matter, that's what we discussed, and that would be more than appropriate. That's the curriculum. So that's where the discussion should be occurring. But again, what we have to be careful of is we don't want teachers they should not be advocating their personal political points of view, because again, whether we agree or not, there are those who disagree. Okay, and so that's the issue that's what this policy exists for. It's a management issue, a management of staff, not students.
May I have one more follow-up? We had a public comment earlier when one of our teachers, I believe, said that if a student asked their opinion about something, that she felt like she was prohibited from. Is that permissible? If a student asks, I don't know the context. Say the class is talking about it, right? It's because it's contemporary issues, or it's talking about political stuff going on right now, or something like that, and is a teacher prohibited from,
I think that's a tough situation, and that's a good question. We've had just recently we had a teacher. I won't go into too many details, but the person expressed their point of view on the election and chose to say things about a certain politician that were not appropriate. No, that's, I think, a violation of the policy. However, if it was asked in a way that was appropriate pursuant to the curriculum, then it's probably okay. This isn't the Office of General Counsel and the labor relations people and the principals and the superintendents go around looking for these things. These are all complaint driven, and we have received complaints from families that say, I don't want this in my class, maybe because they're Christian and they don't believe in that, or maybe because they're their other faith, whatever it may be. And that's the point, is we're not here to pick sides. We're here to provide which we do, an awesome education. And so I can't answer that question fairly because I don't know the context. My answer would be
That's
most
fair.
likely yes. They could give their opinion.
I know context matters, that's fair, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to kind of rapid fire, but I had some.
No, that's
Had some
fine.
questions, so.
I've done depots before.
Thank you, Madam President.
Good questions, Vice President Taylor. Thank you. Anyone, did you have something to add to that, Superintendent?
I'll just
McNeil?
add really quickly. Dr. Taylor, it's around a balanced approach with curriculum and to provide varying perspectives. And we also want to make sure that we acknowledge the fact, because one of our public commenters were providing a safe place for our students. And we want to make sure that our students have that safe place. And so whether that is, and I know the Office of General Counsel, as well as Curriculum and Instruction, as well as the Office of Civil Rights and Equity and Diversity, they are working together on providing a method and a training aspect for our teachers to have that safe space for our students. And so there is a program that is being developed so that a student, if I feel that I need to be able to express my identity in a safe place, that our teachers are well trained and well versed in that product.
Trustee Simon Holland. Thank you, but Superintendent McNeil.
Thank you, Madam President. And I may not be here for the ultimate conclusion of this issue, so I just wanted to share some thoughts. It's my fervent desire that our district finds a way in policy and practice to support our employees in being able to convey their support for constitutional rights such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that all people are created equal. To advocate for the value and dignity of the lives of people who may be different or experience a minority status is not only not political activity to me, it's our educational imperative as part of developing civic and social responsibility in our future members of society. And I'm happy to hear that there is curriculum work being done to give teachers the direction and the support to be able to do that. Some of the concerns I have are, how we more clearly define political activity and prohibited speech so that everybody understands it the way we're talking about it today. I think it's important for that to be understood. And at the corollary to that, how we communicate what's allowed and what isn't. I had a conversation with General Counsel before the meeting started. I'm struggling with understanding what's allowed and what isn't, and I know many of our staff members are as well. And just, how can we encourage civic discourse and dialogue about difficult and contentious issues? Again, I'm happy to hear that there is curriculum work going on about that. I think it's as important as it has ever been, certainly in my lifetime, that we all learn how to have dialogue about contentious issues and about things we disagree on. And I just want to understand, do we make a distinction between advocating for the value of the lives of LGBTQ plus and Black, Indigenous, and people of color, but not the capitalized Black Lives Matter movement? Is there a distinction there? I want to have us all find a way to have the ability to support those things that's clear and understood so it doesn't become another flashpoint for contentious issues. So just wanted to share those thoughts and thank you, Madam President, for giving me that opportunity.
Thank you, Trustee Simon Holland. I know Trustee Kennedy has a question.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to say I support everything that Trustee Simon Holland just said. I agree. I think we have to find ways to be able to have these conversations, and hopefully that we can do this through curriculum in the schools. But I have a question about how does this affect, say, student-driven clubs or activities like Gay Straight Alliance or a BLM club? how do we deal with those?
It doesn't. Again, this is, policy only deals with staff members and their representation of supporting, advocating, and a political activity. So students are still allowed to have clubs. And in fact, I believe many schools do. I see the superintendent nodding her head in affirmance. So it's my understanding schools do. So this has no effect on schools. Excuse me, no effect on those.
Trustee Kennedy.
On those
maybe
clubs.
We actually do have
Yes,
a board
the
policy
reason-
around that as well.
I'm sorry?
Trustee Kennedy, we actually do have a board policy around that. Student-led clubs, they must have an advisor within the school, but we actually have a board policy around that.
Thank you. Yeah, I was aware of that, but I think because of the requirement of having an advisor, and advisors are often teachers, I just wanted to be clear about where we would stand with teachers and supporting those clubs. Thank you.
Trustee Cottle and then Trustee Calvert.
Thank you, Madam President. I had some thoughts, but more thoughts have come to my mind. I know that this is a struggle, and to think in our heads, like, how is Black Lives Matter political speech? And I know that many people have expressed concern on how it's political speech, and I work with young black men every single day. And I mean, their lives matter. They matter to me, and I fight for them every single day. Where it becomes hard is when a court of law, a federal court, says Black Lives Matter is political speech. And as soon as they do that, it changes the game, because we're bound to that. And that's a hard thing, because if we ignore that and take a stand, we expose the district to legal liability in federal court, which is very expensive and will cost the taxpayers a lot of money. And we probably won't be successful, because we would have to allow all political speech. So I absolutely understand the struggle with this. I absolutely understand it. And I hope there are ways that we can, other ways to show our absolute unquestioned support. But this is the position that the school district is in. If the courts didn't rule on this, we would probably have an easier time. But it's hard, and I appreciate the district, explaining it. And I think that, we've had some communication lapses over the last few months on this issue. And I appreciate Chief General Counsel explaining it. This is the difficult position that we're in, because we're all bound to the justice system, and there will be somebody that disagrees and says my speech wasn't allowed, therefore I'll see you in federal court, and that's going to be an issue. So I do think there's work to be done in the future as we show our students and staff that they matter each and every day. And so I personally do not take this issue lightly. But given the information that we have, Board Policy 1310 does serve that purpose. And I know that's hard. That's hard, and I understand. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Cottle. Trustee Calvert.
Thank you, Melina. I think I'm addressing this probably to Neil, but you had mentioned that if a parent didn't want their student participating in a particular activity or whatever, but we know as children grow older, when you're small, you can kind of have a little control over what they say, what they do, but as they get older, they develop their own minds of things that they want to do. So how does that fit into any of this?
Yeah, so when I brought that up, I was talking about how it normally comes about in enforcement, if you will, for lack of a better term, for labor relations. But I think, again, it would be through curriculum. As a mind grows, you know, we don't teach a first grader the same thing we teach a senior, for example. And so the details in the first grade maybe are far less. This is a little bit beyond me curriculum wise, right? Because I'm not but they would be far less. Whereas a senior, you would have more exposure to a bigger, more information, if you will, as it relates to Black Lives Matter or towards the rainbow flag, if that's part of a curriculum and it's part of a movement, and it's part of history, or if I were teaching a law class in the public education system, all of that would fit in to the discussion, and it would be more than appropriate. Would it be appropriate for a first grader? Probably not, because it probably would be over that student's head, using my example. So I think that's how it would fit in my mind. It all goes back to curriculum. I hope that's all right, Superintendent.
But Neil, my thing is that what I'm hearing is that at a certain point in time, the parent is pretty much deciding for that child, I don't want you learning about Black Lives Matters, and that the child is saying, you know what, I don't know anything and I want to learn. So that is my concern. I mean, how do we address that? Or it's what the parent says and that's the end of the conversation?
Misunderstood. I don't think that would be, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I misunderstood, I think, the question. I don't think that would be an opt-out scenario, but I'm not sure I'm the right guy to answer this. I know, I see Debbie or maybe the superintendent would be the better person, but I don't think it would be an opt-out scenario in that case.
So if I'm understanding correctly, Trustee Calvert, the question is around if a child in a primary classroom wants to learn about the
Any
historical
level.
the historical perspectives of Black Lives Matter, would that be allowed within the classroom?
No, what I'm asking is, say I am a student and I'm in 12th grade, and my parents have decided that, Jackie, you're not gonna learn about Black Lives Matter. I don't care what they're teaching, I don't care what the curriculum is, and I'm saying, I wanna know about it. How much control does that parent have over what that child learns? Can they pull them out of the class? How is that like the share where we can say, hey, I don't want my child involved in learning that?
Well, and I see Deputy Superintendent Beiersdorf over there, but what we have to look at is the age of the child. And if they are 18 or over, then they are able to, be in the classroom and listen to the curriculum. If they are under, then the parent has the absolute authority to say, for example, for share, we don't want you to participate. But the issue comes in as far as curriculum, that if it's a standard, if it's a curriculum standard or a content-related standard, and they are assessed on that standard, then they have to be able to participate in that curriculum and get that information.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Beiersdorf, do you have anything to add?
Yes, thank you, President Raymond. Again, Deborah Beiersdorf, Deputy Superintendent. I think it's important to note, too, that all content standards, other than share, are adopted at the state level through a very rigorous process. And then as a public school district in the state of Nevada, we are required to teach those standards. Our teachers can use supplementary materials to help round out the curriculum. I think the previous conversation around the lack of a science textbook adoption in, I think I was thinking it's 22 years, but I know I said 20 earlier, is a perfect example of where supplementary materials are brought into the classroom because the curriculum is just maybe not robust or adequate to cover that particular topic. Trustee Calvert, to talk a little bit about your example about a student at the senior year, for example. I was a former social studies teacher. Those content standards talk about debate. They talk about discourse. They talk about research. They give our students the skills to be able to find the information that they're looking for. And then also too, in recent years, we've adopted our digital citizenship curriculum as well, that teaches students from kindergarten, a very young age, how to navigate social media, how to use the internet for research, finding correct information, where to go. So those are the just brief examples, I should say, about the standards. For example, in a government class and a junior level U.S. history class is another example as well. So the idea is to teach our students how to find information, how to understand the information, how to maybe use the information. So I don't know if that maybe kind of helps answer your question a little bit. Okay, thank you.
Vice President Taylor.
Thank you, Madam President. Just another question for you, General Counsel. You mentioned earlier that in some of the questions you've been answering, and thank you very much for all the clarity, because I think it's very helpful. You mentioned in terms of the policy that's written and how you and your great team of attorneys, because you guys do a great job, have interpreted some of the things in the policy. I mean, we want, I'm hearing from the conversation, at least from here, we want to be able to demonstrate that the value of the lives of the students in our district, and we understand and teachers, quite frankly, educators in our district, but we understand the important role that educators do play in reinforcing and validating those young lives, especially those that need it most. So is there a way that a policy could be written, that our policy could be written in such a way to allow that without opening up that exposure, which we know based upon legal precedent, we probably wouldn't prevail. But is there a thinner line somewhere in there that allows some sort of support or validation or valuing or something that wouldn't give us that level of exposure? Because part of it is interpreting the policy that we have. Well, then could the policy be changed to allow that?
It's tough. It's tough. There's a case out of South Carolina called the Hardwood case where they talk about different levels of speech and how they defined political speech. And it's probably considered the quintessential case on school public speech that's not from the Supreme Court. And in that case, the court said that the board, and in that case, it wasn't the board, so in this case, it would be the board. In that case, the superintendent was able to clearly articulate the reasons for the policy they adopted, and then the policy was adopted. So this board would have to make findings on why it's making this carve out under this policy, or how we would do the rewrite. In that case, going back to some of the examples I talked about earlier, that case, they talked about the Confederate flag. It was in South Carolina, a student, and this was interesting because it was a student wanted to wear it on her shirt, and the school district made findings that because we're 60% African American, because we have racial tensions, and they made a series of findings, we are not going to allow the Confederate flag to fly in our school district. And the court upheld that. It's an interesting case. We would need those type of findings. I do think it's easier to prohibit something than to allow something, which is sad. That's just the case of the state of the law. I struggle with, here's the example I can't get over, and I can't figure out how to differentiate. And I know this will not be popular with folks in this room, and my job is not to be popular, it's to give you the law. And I do not see how you get over pro-life. I just don't. You can sit here and say it's a civil right issue. I think somebody who is pro-life will say it's the ultimate civil right issue. It's about being born. And I'm not saying that's my personal position. That's the position that they're going to take, and I don't see how we get around that. I just don't. And so that's what troubles me. So a teacher now wants to wear a pro-life shirt. I think that in my opinion, I don't see how I can draft a policy that would allow us to prohibit a pro-life shirt and still allow Black Lives Matter and the LGBTQ plus flag. I also think that would apply to pro-choice as well. But
Not even with that cutout you mentioned?
I don't see how I mean, we can draft the cutout if you could make the findings and I can make the arguments. I'm, as I've shared with all of you in attorney-client privilege, and since you're asking this question in public, I presume that's being waived. I'm telling you that it would be a difficult carve-out to create, and that's the one I cannot figure out. I can get around the Confederate flag, because I figured this question was coming. I can get around NRA. I can get around any of those other type of political issues, but I cannot see how I get around pro-life. And NRA is even tough because it's part of our civil rights, whether people like that or not, it is. It's the Second Amendment, which is the Bill of Rights.
I guess when I was talking about cutout, I mean a cutout to allow for the showing of support for something like Black Lives Matter, so the others would be prohibited, but the cutout would be to allow.
Right, I don't see how I don't see how I can draft a policy that allows BLM and LGBTQ plus and then prohibit pro-life or pro-choice. I just don't see how I can do it. Okay. I don't, I guess the argument could be made, well, those students are already in our district, whereas the other student isn't. I don't see a court going for that, but I'm willing to.
I hear you. Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Simon Holland.
Thank you, Madam President. Obvious question. I know you all have done a lot of research, Neil, and I'm just wondering, because it is a federal issue, are there any districts out there that have found a way to navigate this effectively, is one question. And second question, do we have any idea about when that curriculum will be ready for implementation?
I can't answer two, but what I can say is that we did take this to the COSA, which is school attorneys. I don't know what the CO is, but school attorneys. It's a nationwide group. We had multiple meetings throughout the year based on COVID, and then the tragic death of Mr. Floyd occurred, and so obviously the Black Lives Matter issue arose. And I can say that we talked to them and we asked every one of them how to get around this, and every one of them said, do not allow it for your staff. That was their general opinion. I can say I'm aware that Berkeley does. I'm not sure Reno is akin to Berkeley. I just am not. I mean, I will, full disclosure, my daughter goes to school in Berkeley, so, it doesn't, I'm fine with Berkeley, but I don't see us adopting the same standards as Berkeley, so.
Trustee Simon Holland, I can also say that the Council of Great Cities Schools, and they've offered webinars around this issue, around First Amendments because of this, and they have offered that same advice as far as the BLM and the gay pride flag would be political activity. As far as the curriculum, I think Deputy Superintendent Beiersdorf, but I'm looking at Chief Academic Officer Troy Parks. Obviously, we had just presented the action document at the last board meeting around the resolution, and so the curriculum is not ready to go yet. It is being worked on.
I had a question from a teacher online, any idea, will it be do you think it'll be during this school year?
Dr. Parks, do you want to come up to the microphone?
Because I think it's really, I'm so excited to hear about it, and I think it will be really helpful to people, and I know people are looking for, for help, so I was just trying to answer the question for that teacher.
Dr. Parks, real quick, just before you address that, I'll let Neil.
I think the answer needs to be brief. I hate to do that, but this is really not the agenda item. The agenda item is Board Policy 1310, not a curriculum on, so just quick.
Thank you, President Simon Holland. Yes, we anticipate that our essential standards in social studies for our high school students will be complete sometime in January or February.
Thank you, Dr. Parks. I know we have quite a bit of public comment to get to, and I wanted to just share kind of where I'm sitting with this right now. It's, you know, I think the biggest challenge for me, and it is, you know, this whole conversation and the reason I know for the agenda item are primarily about the Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ plus the pride flag issues that we've been thinking about and discussing for many meetings now. And, you know, I think like many of us, I don't understand why we can't move forward with, you know, as a community with including those movements as part of the discourse in our classrooms. And I know that that sort of discourse around those issues is happening and a healthy debate, you know, way. I think where I've gotten a little tripped up is the specifics of policy and of this policy and the, you know, the promotion, I guess, of a political idea and how do these two issues fit into that. And, you know, I think we're all sort of sitting there that it's, you know, I personally wish that we weren't living in a place where those two issues had to be seen as political. I'm not sure that I 100%, you know, feel they are yet. I've really appreciated hearing more from the legal perspective and side of things. But I think, as with many of our issues, there's more, you know, that we have to consider. I also, sitting in this seat, have seen the emails from the community members that do see all these two issues as very political, and I know the other trustees have received those emails as well. And so, you know, I struggle a little bit with how do we, as a district, take something that that we know that there is a, you know, segment of our community that sees them as political issues and change them in policy to be not political. And I'm not saying any of this very eloquently. And so I'm just still kind of trying to figure out how that settles with me and knowing that as a trustee, I serve, you know, a number of different constituencies. And my daughter is in, you know, 6th grade. I was really interested to hear from her throughout this whole fall about how they've handled a lot of political discussion in the classroom. And she has a student that gets pulled, I don't know, every day or however many times they watch CNN Plus because her parents will not allow her to watch CNN Plus in the classroom. And so we know that there are families and students in our schools that are coming from homes where they have differing political beliefs and views of the other members of our school community. And so I'm reconciling kind of all of those different things. I also received, you know, some of the similar emails that our Chief General Counsel mentioned from parents that, you know, whose students were in classrooms where there was a real push of a political idea and how that felt for that family. And I know how it would feel to have my daughter come home and have a, you know, having been in a classroom where a, you know, strong political position was kind of pushed to the class that is something different than I believe. And I again just go back to, and I'm just really stream of consciousness here, saying that, you know, I am struggling with how Black Lives Matter fits into that, because it is, I think in some ways, you know, it is the least political thing, you know, that we could look at as a community. But because of the world and the community we live in, it has become so political for the most ridiculous reason. So how do we reconcile that? And I would like to see us continue to look at that, and I'd be interested to see, I guess, if there are other districts. I don't know that I'm ready to just kind of move on today without kind of considering more information. So that's where I'm sitting right now. I'm sorry, that was very disjointed. Okay, I just need to say it is 5:36. I do know we have a lot of public comment. The governor is having an important press conference at 6 p.m., which we will have to take a recess for. And I believe we have more public comment than we will be able to get in between now and 6. So if there's no further questions or comments from the board, we'll take, is 15 minutes okay for you? Or do you need more than that? Our superintendent unfortunately has to take a call related to the press conference, so we'll hear public comment and then we will have to stop public comment at around 5:55 so that we can take the recess for the press conference, and we will